think. Okay, good morning, everybody. We've had some technical issues as usual, but we're here. So welcome to the Sunday morning session. We have the usual suspects, Martin Williams, Russell Young, and Kevin Elmy. And we are live streaming directly into the membership channel. So today we are going to talk about, where is it? Here we go. Now I'm going to leave us all on, no, well, that's a pretty picture, but we're not talking about that just yet. It's going to be one of those mornings, folks. Okay, so the principles in context, we hear a lot about it. I did mention it 2 weeks ago in the last live. We are going to be honing in on one particular principle, which is the increase the biodiversity. But I'll just go through the principles. So we've got increasing the biodiversity, minimizing soil disturbance, which we spoke about in the last live with the soil key, keeping the ground covered, increasing landscape function, and increasing all cycles. So the technique that we're going to specifically talk about today is choosing a seed mix and having a diverse range of seeds that you can plant for whatever reason. So, and for whatever reason, one of the aspects is, what is your context? So that's what we're really going to sort of open up and explore today with these three beautiful farmers here who have all been in the circles of actually adopting the principles and making this all happen in one way or another, depending on the context, whether they're in Canada or on the Darling Downs or out in the middle of New South Wales. So how are you planting? We're going to be sort of asking these questions. So is it that you're going to be using a certain type of machine? Is it that you might even be using an aeroplane, which we'll have a look at the video in a little bit. Then you've got to be thinking, are you going to go into row, or are you going to just have a complete chaotic cover crop? Are you planting into pasture? So is it eventually for feeding livestock? What inputs are you using? Are you going down the prill or the liquid? That also depends on what machinery that you're using. Are you planning on covering your land and enhancing the soil's microbial activity and the fertility of it and making it a functional soil? Or is it specifically for a cash crop, whether it's seed or whether it's grain, commodity or niche? And then, yes, that covers the last one. Where are you actually going to be selling it? And what other parts of, what is your specific outcome? So you would need to know what your purpose is as well. Okay, so we need to get stuck into this, folks. The seed mix, that's really where we want to start. I know that there are some farmers that have played around with maybe 12 or 15 different ways, and they haven't, in their minds, had much success because maybe just one or two of the species has been a success and actually germinated. And then there are others where they've seen, okay, well, we've planted 12-way mix, and over there specifically a certain type of plant came up, and over here another plant came up. I know in the Back to Basic video with Darren, that's what they were saying. And then overall, what you've actually are harvesting is pretty good across the board. It sort of averages itself out. So who would like to start with why they use a certain mix and how they actually go about putting the percentages together? And it might just be because you're of the way that you're going to be grading it at the end, so that you into your context. Who would like to start with all this? Martin, go for it.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everybody, or whatever time of the day you're at. So just let's go back a little bit further, and that's on that slide there before was principles in context. An important thing to work out there is that it's good when you work out and put principles in context, but for a start, principles is its own little thing, and that's about principles. And context is a separate thing, and that's about context. And then it's when we bring those two things together is principles in context. That's the powerful stuff. But when we're digging down, or say you went to a speaker for a day, and you came home and made your notes. You made notes while you were there. When you come home, one process that you could do for yourself, just to help you understand all these things, is all the notes that you made for the day, write them down and put them into two lists. Was this about principles or was this about context? And so the principles happen for everybody. Ground cover is a principle, but then soil type and rainfall and location and what a particular person's outcome wanted to be, that's all context. So that's just something to think about on principles and context. Right, so when we're growing what we call our mixed species cash crop, and that's context, that's what we've drawn up for ourselves. The mixed species is about diversity, and that's about principles. So just that, that's dividing them up that way. But one of the things, and it's part of our context, is we like to grade our mixed species cash crop apart. So then when it comes to species selection, what we need to do is have stuff that different sizes to one another so that we can run it through the seed cleaning equipment and divide it up. And then specifically, we definitely like having the radish to come out of the seed grading equipment in a particular spot with a high purity, so that we can sell it as a single species, so that people can mix it up into their seed mixes as they wish when it fits their principles and their context. So that seed shape for us is really important. Whereas other people with their grazing stuff, seed shape doesn't matter anything. It's whatever they're something of more importance to them might be of having more diversity in the mix, and so they just crack on to getting more diversity by planting more species. I think that's what I got to offer on that situation.
Thank you. And let's use somebody else's context, whether it's Russell or Kevin. Russell, do you want to go for it?
Oh, yeah, can do. So I guess when we've done the couple of things, obviously the first crop that we grew, I had no idea what I was stepping into, really. Knew nobody that was doing it in our area, et cetera, et cetera. So probably in hindsight got the mix totally wrong. But the idea for us was obviously to improve our soil. That was the first step. Had no thoughts on how we're going to terminate it, etc. Do we get the mix wrong or not? Yeah, possibly we could have made it better with different things in there. But for us, it was about having a go at something we had no idea on what we were doing. So did I have anything in place that Martin was just talking about? No, I probably didn't. It was just a case of jump off the cliff and hope like mad I can fly somewhere at some point before I hit the ground too hard. So obviously throughout that process, I learned an awful lot in probably what I should have done differently. Of course, through meeting you guys and Dr. Christine Jones, etc. Those sort of things all have helped me understand things a whole lot better. But I think as a farmer, you just need to step out there and have a crack at some of this stuff. So whether you get it right or wrong doesn't matter. There is really no right and wrong in agriculture, I don't think. If you can find me a farmer that can tell me that he gets it 100% right all the time, I'd love to meet him. But I don't think it's telling the truth is the reality, So for us, it was just about, have a crack and see where we end up. I guess to add on to where Mark was talking about, I don't know whether this is the right place you want to talk about this, Tamzin, or not, but in people that are growing multi-species mixes like Martin is, and I guess they're growing it with the mindset of they want to be able to split it up through the grading process and get that right. I think there's a bit more to add to that, in that I can see potential where people, if they were intending on growing a crop to be harvested, I think the other consideration you need to think about is also the ability of the header to not only harvest, but also clean that sample good enough and keep the things in the header that you want to stay in the header. So I'm going to throw some things in this mix that you would probably never have together. But let's say you put in a fava bean, which is a really big seed, or quite a big seed to harvest. Obviously, that means you have to have your sieve settings quite wide apart, so quite open with your sieves to let that seed fall through the sieve, so you're going to end up with it in the grain bin. In which case you potentially run the risk, depending on what the straw is like, how wet it is or how heavy it is, as to whether you can blow the trash out that would want to fall through the size of the sieve setting that you've got. And then equally so, the weight of the grain that you are trying to harvest. So if you were going to have, say, a sunflower or a Siberian millet or an oat or some of those things that are lighter, it then can limit what fan speed you can run with your header. So if you have to cut your fan speed back in order to keep those seeds in that sample, then you run the risk of getting more trash in there that you you can still grade it out, but I think we all know that the more trash that's in a sample, the more work it is and the slower it is to try and grade that and clean it up. So, there's probably a lot of things that you need to think about if you're looking at a mix that you want to take through to harvesting. Obviously, if it's just for forage, it's not such an issue. But for me, and I don't have the experience Martin's got with that sort of stuff, but certainly what we harvested last year, which had some wheat, and then just had all the things that came up in that multi-species paddock from the previous couple of crops. It wasn't so hard to handle. It was quite a clean sample, really. I was quite surprised how good it was, but I can see potential problems if people don't think about that, as in the size of the seed, as in the biggest seed, which means you have to have the sieves open. Well, you've got two options there. You either keep your sieves open to get that seed in the sample, or you shut them down and you let it go out the back of the header. And or if it's a light seed, you blow it out the back of the header, basically. So there's a bit in all of that stuff to take it from, what you're trying to achieve and what you can actually achieve might be two different things, not only at the grading point, but also at the harvesting point.
Thank you, Russell. So what I've noticed then going on from that is, from Kevin's photos, there's a lot more intercropping, which seems a lot more organized and neater when you actually look at it in a photo side of the way that it's put together. So Kevin, can you explain then, I'm presuming there's less of that actual mixed mixed multi-species and more of sort of alignment of the multi-species?
It's all over the place. The easy part, if like a lot of people are just set up for a single shoot for seeding, so it goes down the tube. It just looks visually a lot more organized. The biggest thing is goals. Starting with goals, knowing your equipment, knowing your context, and then going ahead and looking at your functional plant groups. So, with Martin, he has his legume, he has grass, and he has broadleaf. Beautiful. When we start looking at some of the pictures, in Western Canada, there's going to be producers that don't want to grade. They just want to keep it simple. They want to harvest their wheat, but they still want the benefits of the multi-species. So they'll grow some biennial crops in there so they stay vegetative throughout the whole growing season, or they are only, a couple centimeters tall. So in this case, this is a field of I think probably some barley, and what they have is some Italian ryegrass and Persian clover. So they've seeded the barley, and whether they seed it at the same time or delay it, whether they use herbicide to hurt that cover crop to keep it low. This way they harvest their cereal. This is still green growing underneath it, so now there's options for grazing or just for soil improvement. And so this is one of the ways of, and once again, Martin's been out in Western Canada, and he knows that we can get a little on the dry side. I think you guys can relate to that. So anytime we try seeding later in the season, we're going to be looking for those rain events coming through to, if we're going to be broadcasting into an established crop, we need that rain to get our relay cover crop up and going. Whereas if we seed it with our spring, in our case, spring seeded cash crops, keeping it simple, one pass, and getting established and managing it through that whole growing season, picking the species that will stay low, that isn't going to be interfering with harvest. So this way we can play around with late maturing the species that will continue growing after harvest. On the flip side, when we start looking at with the intent of multi-species harvesting, now it's once again going back to that triangle of the grass, legume, broadleaf, getting that diversity. And one of the things that Dr. Chris Nichols has said, including things like linseed in the mixes, will help regulate the boron to help bring the maturity of the species together. So I thought that was a really interesting comment that she made.
So this is what Christy Whelan's doing, Kevin. She's got linseed as chickpeas. Oh, sorry, I'm having a shocker today.
Yep, there we go. So this is an organic grower in southern Saskatchewan, outside of Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, organic producer, and alternating rows of chickpeas and linseed. They had a little bit of a wild brassica weed issue, so we included a biennial grass in with it, and you can see a little bit of in the top left-hand corner, it's some wild mustard is the weed, and he said the year before it was corner to corner. Threw in a little bit of grass in with it, and that soaks up that nitrate. The linseed is in there, covering up the rows in between the rows of the chickpeas. And what Lana Shaw, she has a Southeast Research Farm in Red River, Saskatchewan. What she has found is by having these rows of linseed in between the chickpeas, it reduces the disease incidence on that chickpea incredibly.
Chickpeas always got a drama with bloody disease. They're notorious for it, and that's a breakthrough right there.
Oh, absolutely. And this is that, a little bit of agronomic change. And so where Lana Shaw's growing it, she has no right to grow chickpeas in Southeast Saskatchewan because it's way too wet. Even in Moose Jaw, where it's dry, farmers will be out in the field spraying fungicide 5 to 8 times a year. Whereas when they start doing stuff like this, organically, they don't have any options. But it was basically disease-free.
Yeah, that's cool. That is super, super cool.
So in this scenario, then, it's more like companion planting, is it? So that you're actually only harvesting the chickpeas. You're not harvesting the linseed as well? Oh, you are.
Both are being harvested at the same time. Yeah.
Okay.
And there's a big seed and a small seed. The grade, splitting that up is easy, real easy. Even a farmer could do that.
And it has room to put a cereal into it.
Yeah, that's and then, well, you did say you were putting the grass in there, and then the cereal in the spot of that grass. Then you're on legume, broadleaf, and cereal, all paying crops, all gradable. That even if it had wheat or barley in there or oats, that's absolutely gradable. And away you go, off to the races. And got that spray machine out of there with all the bad stuff in it.
And your soil's functioning.
Oh, what? Yeah, and so and what it is that the biggest box and the first box, I think most of the time that we're ticking with our multi-species stuff is the diversity box. Look, there's other boxes we're ticking as well. Like it's not only about diversity, but it really, really does tick that diversity box. We're 3 species away from monocultures. We're getting function. We're getting cycling back happening. We're on the track. That's cool.
And one of the things that I've developed is a spreadsheet that figures out. So if we know the number of seeds per kilo, of each of your species. You can put it in there, and you can actually figure out, so especially when you're starting out into this, you can figure out how many seeds per square meter of each species we're putting down. So then we're getting proper representation of the different species, because if you went in with 90 radish seeds per square meter, you would find out too late that's too high. So this is where, when we were in Dunedoo 2 years ago, one of the people at the workshop we did came in, and they were wanting to seed, or their sales agronomist told them to seed 1,600 seeds per square meter of a forage mix. And so I worked through it, and first of all, I thought my calculator was broken. But when I went back to my Canadian version, it was 160 per square foot, and I said, "No, we need to change this dramatically."
Anyway.
So just to clarify to anybody listening, Dunedoo's in the middle of New South Wales, but to the east. That's correct, isn't it? So Dunedoo's actually in Australia.
Yeah.
Okay, the mix.
Can I just chime in there? I appreciate Kevin's put a lot of effort into his spreadsheet and everything. We do it a whole lot more simple than that. And if we're doing a 4-way mix, say, we take the regular rate that we would plant that as a monoculture crop, and divide it by 4, and then just gives us each rate, and then add them and put them in the mix like that. So that's pretty simple. But then people in this, the worst thing that ever happened for regenerative agriculture is that these monoculture agriculture boys get this precision farming thing embedded in their head. And then they're wanting to, because, the chemicals, you need to put them on it very accurately, because if you're not, you can have toxicity issues. And if you're not, you're also going to be running away spraying out a whole lot of money that didn't need to be put out there. But when we're doing mixing and that sort of thing, good enough, rough enough is good enough. And then that would be the thing I'd say too, is if your mix said to mix 22 kilos of radish seed, say, into your mix, and your bag's got 25, just put in 25, and don't worry about saving 5 kilos for the mice to get into, and for you to forget about, and have invested and not growing. Plants build soil. We just got to grow stuff. Keep growing stuff. And like one of my little buddies down in South Australia, Sam Shinkle, said the other day, I said, just got to keep growing stuff, Sam. And he said, yeah, grow everything. Something will grow. You gotta give something an opportunity to grow. And even if it doesn't grow, it's not lost. Like once some of those seeds stay in the soil, and they might show up once you've improved your soil a little more. It's just, and back to what Russell said when he first ever did it, no one else around him was doing it. The big trick is just to step off the block and fall in the water, and come up gasping for air. But you learned how to come up, and you'll have so much stuff that you can sort through and observe and take the lessons from. And next year you're 1 year in front, with the knowledge.
That's it. We all like jumping in the deep end.
No, well, actually, no, we don't. No, we don't. It's only some brave ones of us that do jump in the deep end. Someone else likes to watch somebody else jump in first and then see that they didn't drown.
Sometimes when we jump in the deep end, it's only waist deep.
Yeah.
So we can stand up, and we're not drowning. We're completely safe. It's just jumping what we're jumping into.
That's
perfect. No, that's cool.
Love it. Okay, Russell, then, talking about your mix, I do have a photo here. If I can actually work this correctly today. Was this the first mix that you sowed as the multi-species?
Yeah, I reckon possibly so. Is that my mix or someone? Yeah, don't know. Yeah, no, it is. Yep, right. Yep, I'd say that's the first one. I reckon. Yeah, yep.
So, can you remember what there was in it?
Roughly.
Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot now.
Yeah. So, oats, triticale, the brassicas, so the tillage radish, the turnip, buckwheat, plantain, chicory, 2 medics. There's something else here that's only about 9. There's 3 more. Field pea. That's 10. There's 2 more. I will think of it, but yeah, right now, just can't pick it up in the mix there.
So did you see that they were sort of uniformly growing? Because that first multi-species that you did looked amazing from my perspective. Not that I'd ever seen one before. Or did you notice that, oh, okay, this is actually doing better? So you had more, I don't know, the legumes were actually outperforming, or sorry, the brassica was outperforming the other things. Did you notice anything specific?
Look, I think everything performed reasonably well. I wasn't sort of disappointed in anything really. I guess the only thing was the day before you guys came to the place. I think that was the 22nd, so it might have been the 21st of July. We got a cracking frost, and that, like, it was pretty savage, and that took care of any of the buckwheat that was exposed. Anything that was covered was okay. It certainly wounded it, but it didn't take it out. But yeah, I think as the season went on, definitely the brassicas probably stood out as having done the best. But the oats, I mean, there was, and I don't even know what variety of oat it was in the mix. I imagine it was probably a fairly like a cheaper version of oat that they just throw in a mix. What its disease tolerance was like, I don't know, but there wasn't too much rust or anything on the oats until right at the end. So
They're olives.
that was the benefit of that multi-species thing, more so than potentially the particular oat itself. But yeah, certainly I don't think there was anything in that mix that did poorly, really, other than what got frosted. Like the medics did pretty well in under what was a pretty thick cover of stuff, but yeah, they still performed. So yeah, I was happy with the mix, and I guess whilst when we planted that mix, I had no idea what I was going to do to finish it, none whatsoever, and we ended up obviously roller crimping it. Do you want me to go into that now, Tamzin, or do you want to talk about that later, or?
Oh, no, yeah, I think we can, because that's the story behind this mix. And then I think we'll move on to Kevin's sample of what he's given us, just because, yeah, this is what you ended up with. Yeah.
So we ended up with a 6-hour job there digging the turnips and the radish out of that roller crimper. And look, had we have owned that machine ourselves, we would have just parked it and let it dry out, and most of them would have fallen out, I suspect. But the reality is that was someone else's machine, and it had to go back the next day. So it came to us clean, so it was obviously going to go back to them clean. So yeah, we spent all that time digging it out. But to say that we got that mix wrong, well, yeah, I suppose from the point of view of clogging a roller crimper up, yeah, we got it wrong. But the crimper still worked fine with those in there. I don't think there was any difference in the way it actually crimped the crop and achieved that outcome. But of probably the biggest benefit of having those two things in there was that, for me, as someone who was out there looking at this and going, well, have I done the right thing? What did I get right? What did I get wrong? Where am I going to go with all this eventually, etc.? Underneath those turnip and radish is where we found worms fairly consistently. Now, if I didn't have that in that mix, would I have found worms as easily? I don't know. But I'm pretty happy that mix was there, and that I got to see what the how the soil functioned and how everything worked. And like underneath those turnip and that, you could dig down. It was quite soft compared to everything else around it, which is not something we're used to. I mean, our monoculture crops are really the soil's really quite tight, like to dig by hand, I mean, and yet underneath those things was really nice and soft. So did I, that's why I say, did I get that mix wrong? Well, maybe I did. Maybe I could have done a better job of that mix, but definitely if I had my time over again and I wasn't too worried about digging out a roller crimper, I would have no hesitation in throwing that mix in again for a soil improver. But I would definitely have other things in there, and linseed would definitely be one. But yeah, I was happy with it. I think it did well.
So I think really, though, that you you tick 2 boxes because you wanted it as a ground cover. You wanted it to condition the soil. What you, like you said at the very beginning, what you hadn't thought about was how you were actually going to terminate. So this was a perfect crop for grazing.
Yeah.
And to improve that soil. And I saw the difference in the soil. It was phenomenal, because I also filmed the monoculture wheat. Sugar drip that you grew alongside the multi-species sugar drip. And the soil was very, very different.
Yep,
and what I loved as well was the chicory would just held on. I don't know, is it chicory biannual? Yeah, it is. Thanks, Kevin. Because it just held on and on and on, and it grew through flooding water as well, flooding paddock as well.
Yeah. I mean, it was pretty resilient. It really hit in the plantain, quite resilient, but even till last year, so that's 3 winters on in that wheat paddock that we harvested and had those other things in to try and grade out. There was still brassicas coming up in there, So we ended up with a few things in there that had carried on from those last couple of seasons. So good to see.
And have they got in your way of harvesting for seed?
Not really. Only that you do have to get them out when you're grading if you want to keep that full seed. Yeah. You just which wasn't that hard to do. There was no big seeds in there that were a problem. The oats didn't come back. They were finished. There was no oats returning again. So we didn't have any issues with anything that did come back. No.
Okay, so Kevin, let's move on to your seed mix then, if we may. And I'm just sort of contrasting the difference. So what context did you use this multi-species in?
So this was for a fodder crop. And so there's some non-GMO corn in there. There's some safflower, some turnips, some collards, and some looks like Italian ryegrass is what I would guess that is. And so if we're, the whole idea was to, do some stockpile grazing. So warm season grass, cool season grass, the safflower, it's a non-brassica broadleaf, a little bit of brassica in there. I don't see any legume component in it, but it may be something that's already been grazed on. And so nitrogen levels were high. The context was nitrogen fixation wasn't a thing that they needed to check off on. So once again, I've been doing these cover crop blends for 15 years now. So the first question is, when I'm designing blends for people, is what's your goal? What are you wanting to change in the soil? What is it? A feed? Is it how are you going to harvest it? How are you going to terminate it? All those questions, so that this way we can have the goal of the producer. We can figure out what the seeding limitations are, what the harvest limitations are, get all those out in the open. And then when they're producing these goals and how do they want to change things, now we have a matrix in place to say at the end of the season, was it successful? And so if it was going to be silaged and then grazed after, how was the silage? How was the grazing? Which one is going to be more important? If it's going to be okay, so it's a cash crop, I'm going to harvest it for grain, and then I want to do some grazing on it. Was that successful? And so this is where, the blend in behind me here. My goal was, it was a soybean cash crop the year before. When that next season came around, I seeded this diverse mix behind me with the goal. It was underseeded to perennial ryegrass that was going to be for seed production. So I was going to have this as a full season cover crop to fix nitrogen, build soil structure, all of the soil health matrices. But the goal was to produce all the nitrogen for that perennial ryegrass crop, which would be an equivalent to about 120 kilos of nitrogen per hectare. And it grew well. It was, mid-thigh high. It did produce enough nitrogen for that crop. But then we got, that would be about 3 centimeters of rain during the whole growing season. So the perennial ryegrass, it didn't do as well as what it could have, should have. But the people that were putting on the full fertility, they got a little less yield than what I got. So once again, soil health.
Martin, can you unmute you? Thank you. So going to you, Martin, with your crazy mixed cover crop. Well, sorry, cash crop, 4-way blend. What is it? How did you start the design of that? What did you look at primarily?
Oh, yeah. So it evolved. When we first, look, I don't know, it's about 8 years ago, we went to Cole Seiss's place and he had a multi-species crop in and we looked out in it and like we walked in that paddock. It felt good, you know, like it gave us a bit of a buzz about what was going on there. And so Darren and I drove home and we talked about it and whatever. Anyway, then, like, you know how Darren is, he doesn't let the cat out of the bag sometimes. And we went home and went about our business. Anyway, it was later on after planting. Darren said, "Oh, these multi-species are going all right." "Oh, right. Which ones?" Anyway, went out and had a look at them, and then that started our stressing period. Like, you know, we're thinking about all the stuff. What variety will come right first? Will they come right? You know, which one's going to be taller? Are we going to be able to harvest all of them? When are we going to harvest them? And all this sort of thing. Anyway, that all went on, and we kept checking it to see if it was ready to harvest, and it wasn't. Checked it again, and it wasn't. Anyway, we'd finished all the regular monoculture harvest, and then the multi-species all came right together. And that is what has happened every year since we've ever done that. It just gets to and it syncs up. You know, there's 1,000 different reasons why that could be. We haven't tested whether they are, but it's definitely a combination of all these things that goes on. But diversity is the driver here. It's having all these things in there and planted together. Then just back to Russell's thing about harvesting it. We were stressing about that too. You know, what do we do? And then we're thinking, well, what settings are we going to use on the header or combine, whatever you want to call it, as to what we do here? And we've got everything in there. And in your book, you know, in the book, the recommended settings, there is no multi-species thing there that you can pick up your concave speed and rotor speed and your concave gap and your fan settings and your buddy sieve settings and all that sort of thing. So we just, well, what do we got to lose? We were harvesting wheat with it last time. There's wheat in here, and we just flew straight into it. So we had lupins and that in there, and you know, you're not supposed, like, the theory is you're not supposed to thrash lupins and peas and that sort of thing too hard or too tight, because you'll split them. But then you've got to thrash your wheat reasonably tight and reasonably hard to get it to thrash. And then the same thing, well, whatever was going on. But we don't change our settings very much off wheat settings, even when we've got a large legume in there. And it seems to be that we've got a fair bit of stuff going through the header or the combine, and it cushions it going through, because, you know, a lot of the times when you're like field peas, for example, you're not putting a whole lot of stuff through, and that's why you got to be gentle on it. Whereas when it's in there with some radish and some oats and some wheat as well, it sort of cushions it going through, and it's amazing how much stuff comes in the box and how much you don't have to fiddle your settings. Oh, you know, it's a smart header, you know, combine operator that knows how to, if they're seeing they're blowing a bit much radish out the back, well then, yeah, you know, cut the wind back a bit. And then by doing that, we might just have a little bit more lighter stuff in our sample when we're when we've got it ready to grade. But oh, absolutely, with time, we weren't taking much stuff out of our grading this year at all. You know, there wasn't a whole lot of difference between the seconds in the multi-species as what there was in monoculture crops. So it's, you know, just about living and learning and observation and doing and that sort of thing. And you only get there by doing. Did that get all your questions? There was something else there I missed, I think.
Oh, yes. Sorry, I was going to ask you a question. But Darren has always chosen to plant the multi-species first.
Oh,
whereas,
yeah. part of that is in our situation out there, and we've, smartest kid in the class who's doing stuff and getting results. And Bruce Maynard's done that stuff. He did all the homework. We just took his stuff straight up about what he calls no-kill cropping, and what that is to be early and dry. So then we're not having to do knockdown herbicide sprays and that sort of thing. And then the risk with going early on crops is that if they mature, they're maturing a bit early and that sort of thing, then they're subject to frost. But we've sort of added 2 or 3 weeks to our growing season by planting them as multis. Now, why that is, bloody hell, we'll need 100 scientists to do 100 different theses and whatever to work all that stuff out. But that's something that we've observed over time, is that all our multi-species are giving us 3 weeks extra in the season. So come frost time, at like 2/3 the way along, we're probably two-thirds later anyway. So something that would have got frosted in a monoculture doesn't get frosted in a multi, because it's happening another 2 weeks later.
Yeah, that whole frost protection's really intriguing, because I know that people that, even if, just for example, I don't want to put the cat amongst the pigeons, but even if worm juice doesn't do anything, it actually does protect the plants. But at the same time, it's the multi-species as well. They're protecting each other from the frost, particularly from the frost, is what I'm finding.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the really important part here, is about, it's never ever one thing. It's always a combination. And what we're doing with these multis, and then even with our friendly ferts and that sort of thing, is we're just increasing the combinations. And I suppose, and the more combinations you have, the higher chance you got of winning. And we want to win.
And Kevin, what have you found with the whole frost? Because of course, frost and snow and cold weather is ripe out there in Canada.
Yeah, the biggest thing is, especially when we start talking about our winter cereals. So they're seeded in our fall after harvest. Then they go under the snow for 5 months or whatever the number is, and then this time of year the snow starts disappearing and they start waking up. Anytime that we're going into a monoculture residue versus a multi-species, the multi-species residue just gives those that frost tolerance, cold tolerance. It just makes those plants stronger.
So if I show this, is that what you were talking about? Has that gone through winter?
No. This is a barley field outside of Calgary, Alberta. This producer silaged off barley and in between the rows seeded some, once again, Italian ryegrass. There was some annual clovers along with some chicory. And the intent was to go out and graze it. And this is, once again, one of those years where we have 30 mils of rain during our growing season. But even then, with so little moisture, they ended up, it kind of saved their bacon. Never mind the fact that, management-wise, they cut $150,000 of fertilizer out of their operation, and they didn't have to do in-crop spraying because there were no weeds. We replaced the weeds with these actively growing relay cover crops.
Yeah.
Now then, moving on, I do have, because as you know, I like to show all my photos, and there's always a story behind every photo. So this one I absolutely love. And just as this is Russell harvesting the sugar drip through after the multi-species or during the multi-species, and then his dad driving the planter alongside him, and that planter missed my ute by, no joke, 0.5 centimetre. That was precision farming. I did. My heart was in my throat as I was standing there filming it. So Russell, just explain then, how are you harvesting and planting? What's the concept behind that together?
Yeah, so I guess obviously it was the right time to be harvesting the sugar drip there. So regardless of any other decision, it was the time to do that. But certainly we were wet enough at that point in time. So this was 2022. Yeah, that's right, 2022. So we'd probably had some frost by that stage. I'm not sure. I nearly reckon we have had. So yeah, obviously the sugar drip. The reason why I grew that in with that summer mix was looking for the height difference, I suppose, to harvest it so that we were able to get the grain that we wanted without having everything else in there. So like Martin's trying to harvest 4 different things. In that scenario, I was trying to basically harvest just one, but growing other things that were lower in the canopy so that we weren't getting them in. So really the only thing that we got in that mix was the sunflowers. The taller ones of them we were getting, but there wasn't a whole lot that ended up in the sample either. So I was probably able to blow a bit of that out the back and or sieve it out. But yeah, it worked out fine. I think that crop harvested, so the equivalent area between that multi-species and the monoculture was 7 ton off the multi-species, where we did get 10 ton off the same area of monoculture. But I had more acres than that in, but that was just a comparison. So, but bear in mind that paddock had the Cultivating River came and flooded it a couple of times. We had water on it, and it was incredibly wet right through that whole period, and the next crop as well. So it wasn't conducive to a great start. But so we obviously got that harvested that day, and I got Dad in to start planting it as well. The next crop, I suppose, just to try and keep that living root thing happening, keep that living root in the soil, and obviously. From where I started, which was the previous crop that we roller crimped, then we went into that one there, and rolled through into the one that Dad's planting again, all back to back. So we don't normally get to do that because we're normally not wet enough. We don't get enough moisture, but we were lucky through that period that it was very wet. So it allowed me to just keep planting crops basically. And I was curious. Obviously, you can't keep growing things for nothing as such, and trying to build the soil health, and that was a great thing. But at some point in time, long term, and it wouldn't have mattered if that had kept going on for another couple of years. It wasn't that big of an area, and I was quite prepared to lose money if I had to gain the experience. But ultimately, you have to make money out of it somewhere at some point. So to be able to harvest that crop was good. I would have loved to have had the opportunity then to go in and start looking at different protein levels and all that sort of stuff in the grain. Not that you would normally test something like sugar drip as a seed crop for that, but just to understand what the flow-on effect of that benefit was from the previous crop. But yeah, so we went in and planted the same day simply because our soil, when you're like running the header through as it dries out, like when it's quite wet like it was, it can tend to go a bit hard. So we have trouble, not so much with the disc opener dropping the seed in, but actually closing that trench is probably our biggest trouble. So we just did it straight away. If you sort of get it within that first 12 hours or 24 hours, you've got the ability then to close that trench. So that's why we were doing the 2 operations on the same day. Had it been dry, obviously we would have just harvested and not planted, but because it was wet enough, we did the 2 things. So we were dropping down multiple liquids there in the blue tank on that planting tractor. And I don't exactly remember all the things that were in the mix that we were planting, but there was at least 4 or 5 or 6 things in there. And then obviously relying on other things to come up that had already been planted in that paddock as well. So that was the whole concept behind that. And it didn't work that well. That crop that Dad was planting there, it was too wet, and it just really struggled with a lot of things. But again, learning experience. So.
And so this sort of leads me on to when you are planting, what do you put down the chute? Like, will it be a prill? Will it be liquid? How do you make that decision?
Diversity, everything, throw it all down. So no, we look at.
You're learning, Russell. You're learning.
So like with our liquids, we throw lots of things in. We don't just put one thing down. So we will do, like, within reason. I mean, there's not much point trying to put 30 things down, obviously, but we'll quite comfortably put 5 or 6 different things down. With our seed, obviously, depending on what's going on, but I like to try and put down some sort of composted chicken manure product, or I don't particularly like the feedlot. I don't really like any of it because of obviously what they put through the animals, unless you could get it from an organic grower. But I guess something is better than nothing in that line, I think. So yeah, try and put something down that is an organic material, like the chicken manure or the cow manure. And yeah, obviously depending on what we're doing, certainly in a multi-species we don't fertilise anything, and none of those crops that you've seen had been fertilised. But in our monoculture situation, obviously we're still at that point where we do have to do that. So yeah.
Kevin, what do you use?
On our farm, it was there's a company out of Winnipeg, Manitoba that had a compost product that we put on the seed. Now they're dealing with a liquid extract also, and a lot of producers go in that direction. Besides that, it was I wasn't exposed to a lot of these other technologies. Didn't have a lot of feedlots in the area. Don't have any feedlots where we were. So it was, working on plants, getting those plants growing, lots of diversity, having green plants as many days in the year as I could. So one of the things that when I'm talking to producers here is when they tell me it's too dry to seed a cover crop, I ask them if they have weeds growing. And of course, oh yeah, there's always weeds growing. Okay, well, which weeds and what are the seed size? Let's replicate what nature's doing. So that if there's weeds growing, okay, let's get those covers in. And once again, if we keep it cheap, so that this way, if it is a wreck, okay, so we haven't lost a lot of money on it, but we haven't given the opportunity if we haven't done it something. And so this is where having these relay cover crops like Brussels, when you have those plants growing underneath the cutting bar, that's exactly what I want to see in these fragile, moisture stressed areas. Have that green plant growing, harvest above it, and let them continue growing so that we don't have to go out and especially if we're using a tine seeder, for every pass you do with a tine seeder, you're going to lose about 2.5 centimeters of moisture. That's a quick rule of thumb that they're using. So using a disc, well, okay, we've reduced that risk of drying up the soil, but so now it's that extra pass. And so if you have the labor able to go out and be harvesting and seeding at the same time. So when I was seeding our winter cereals, I would be out harvesting for a couple of days with my father. We had 2 combines on the farm. And so then once he got far enough ahead, I switched over and I became the seeder man. And so as he was harvesting, I was chasing him with the drill, getting our, in this case, winter cereals put in the ground. Or we'll see about another option of when we start getting get the plane video going.
Oh yes. This is another way.
Now with technology, so instead of using a plane, now these drones are out there flying around and they do a fairly good job of seeding a small seeded species. So this is a winter triticale crop, and what we're doing is seeding 4 pounds of radish into this triticale crop. So it's getting into the dough stage, blowing it on, and what that's gaining us is 2 to 3 weeks of growing. We want them to germinate. So after going out and seeding, and once again, you see those nice fluffy clouds in the sky. So they were forecasting a rain, and of course, getting this close to harvest, yeah, it's going to start raining right when we don't need it.
Of course.
So when we go to the next picture, so we harvested that triticale crop, and about 2-3 weeks later, and this what was starting to poke up through the straw after we run the header through. So this would have been about the middle of August, and normally, we start getting frost about September the 10th, and that -4, -5. And when October rolls around, then soil temperatures start dropping below 4 degrees Celsius. So in order to harvest the crop, seed it in September, and have 6 weeks of growth to get something significant, well, this is gaining us, instead of turning around and seeding something at this stage, So, you know, we would have 0 plant growth at this stage, whereas here, you know, the radishes are 2-leaf and they're doing their thing. So at the stage, those roots are down probably 10 centimeters. And you know, they're established, they're going to go through, and well, in this case, they'll be green right until November. So it's a huge win for us from the standpoint of gaining those 3 to 4 weeks of growth before everything gets shut down on us.
And so they stay alive, do they, Kevin? They just go dormant, but alive?
No, once with radishes, once you hit 3 nights of -9, then they die.
Okay.
So otherwise, you know, they'll act as a biennial when at this time of the year. If you give them too much time and they get enough sunlight, they will throw up a seed, like a flower, and try producing seed. But really not conducive to growing it for seed here in a lot of the years. But the key is small seeds, seeding those small seeds. You know, having volunteer crops growing, having, you know, the canola, the linseed, whatever, having it germinate in our fall and then get winter killed. That's a cheap, free cover crop. So if we don't have enough diversity, okay, so now we can start blowing on things like the annual ryegrass or the radish or the turnips. There's lots of options. Once again, small seed doesn't take much moisture to get these things going, and if we get them underneath the canopy, it's going to have that micro water cycle in there to get these seeds to sprout, and gives them a chance to get going.
So let's lead us on to the grading aspect. So whether you're grading for seed or for grain, commodity or niche. And when I say niche, I'm talking even about brewing, distilling, specifically for anything that anybody wants. How are we going about it? Because we've seen a lot from Martin with his 4-way grading. There's this one here that Kevin has given me. This is a 2-way. Which one's this? Soybean and canola. So what are the logistics then with this type of grading under normal circumstances? Because when you are producing grain for commodity, it's pretty easy, I'm guessing. I mean, I've never actually done it myself, but you take it off the paddock, your header cleans it as well as it can, and then it just gets shipped off, doesn't it, to wherever it's stored, the wholesale person. Is that correct? Is that how commodity works?
Yeah,
pretty much. You're still concerned,
monoculture commodity, pretty right.
Yeah, but it depends on the market too. So in Western Canada, oats and peas are very common to grow them together. And once again, you set your machine for peas, the oats thrash out, beautiful. But if you get some of the pea chips into the oats, the oat market gets some buyers that get a little grumpy when they see pea chips in their oats. So you have to be a little more gentle and a little more thorough on the cleaning. In this case, for ourselves, the soybeans were a seed crop we were growing, and the canola was a byproduct of it. So if there was some soybeans into the canola, the crusher didn't care, away it went. Whereas the soybeans, so I put it through the rotary cleaner, and then it went through our wind and screen, and I just put it through the wind and screen just to make sure that it meet the seed quality and inspection.
And then Martin.
We just for the exercise last year, we grew one paddock that was all commodity crops, that was canola, lupins, and wheat. And yeah, that was a really straightforward grade. So and it all went. Oh well, Darren saved the canola as seed because it's an open pollinated variety. We are allowed to do that. yeah, and then the lupins, yeah, they were just commodity, and the wheat was just commodity. But that all went through my grading system at 15 tonnes an hour. Pretty straightforward. The people might say they need more than 15 tonnes an hour. Well, that's just a matter of scaling it if you want more capacity. Then yeah, like we've been doing the one with the radish. So it was radish, lupins, and wheat. And we ended up with some, this is a cool story, because we ended up with some black oats graded out of that, wild oats, and I tidied them up, and I'd had inquiry on black oats before, wild oats. Anyway, I knew where the inquiry was coming from, and I let that person know, and he let another farmer know, and I sold 3.2 tonnes of wild black oats the other day, graded and in bulker bags for $1,200 a tonne.
Beautiful.
So that's the niches I'm talking about.
So, and tell me if that's not something for nothing.
Oh, well done.
That's definitely cashing in on a byproduct.
So was he going to put them as a crop, Martin? Was he going to put them in as a crop?
Yeah, the fella that I'd sold them to, he's right down the diversity rabbit hole, and he's thinking that there's things that there's going to be attributes that those wild oats have got that he wants, and he was willing to pay for them. Mostly they'll go into a bit of rougher country, and it's a grazing operation, so he's not dropping it into his cropping country or anything like that. But anyway, he's going to give me some money.
And so your Daikon radish, Martin, that you've now set up as a proper little business with Darren as Maverick Seeds.
Yeah. Yep, I was just doing, I had to do some adding up, and stuff that we've sold this year, we've got invoices to go out at bloody $90,000. So it's definitely a money spinner for us. It's really, really working.
And how did that come about then? Because of course that was planted in with the multi-species.
Yeah. Well, that went back to when we first ever went over and saw Cole Sice's stuff. That time we come back and Darren grew it, and then we harvested it. And so that seed now, that seed is what we've grown it on and on and on and on and on. So I don't know, we're up to 6 or 8 generations now of that, and that seed has always been grown in a multi. And never ever any in-crop sprays, and really cut back our herbicides. And in the last couple of years, friendly ferts, so no artificial, like all biological type ferts, no artificials in that. So, you know, when you start talking about epigenetics and all that sort of stuff, like there's just no end to that rabbit hole. I think we've got different radish now to what we had before. But there's going to be a bit of noise here, so I'll stop.
All right. So yeah, okay. So wrapping it up then, you have to, as Kevin has explained, know what your goals are, what your context is, putting the principles into practice, using specific techniques for your scenario. If you haven't got all of those ducks lined up, there are mistakes to be made, and that's okay, because as Kevin said to me, the fail means first attempt in learning, and I'm very good at failing, but I don't classify it as failing. I classify it as actually learning. Just takes a bit of a knock to the ego every time. No, you have to sort of pick yourself up a bit. There are plenty of different ways of planting, and aerial is one that I've just seen and learnt. And then, of course, you've got the tines, you've got the disc planters, you've got the broadcasting, depending on your scenario, why you're growing it. Are you growing it inter-row as a companion? So that means that you are growing 2 crops, but one is being sacrificed for the other. But the one that is being harvested will actually be of much higher quality because of its companion that it was planted with. Are you growing it in chaotic mixed style that Darren loves to do? Are you growing it into a pasture so that ultimately it's for livestock, but it can be a double cash crop because you can add the livestock early enough so that when it does grow and goes to seed, you can then harvest that. Are you also, we haven't really touched on this, but you can grow it under canopy and at base of trees, like in orchard scenarios or vineyards or anywhere that you are growing food, whether it's trees or shrubs, and even corridors of multi-species strips. Brilliant way. If you are on broad acre, it's almost like adding a hedgerow, and then you will increase your biodiversity of your beautiful pollinating insects and the diversity under the ground as well. What is your specific outcome? Are you harvesting? Are you grazing? Are you doing both? Are you producing seed or grain? Are you just covering the ground because you actually want to in that Sabbath year, that 7th year? I'm not sure whether some of you have heard of this, but you give that entire area a complete and utter rest. That's a great way of rotationally incorporating your land and dividing it into those 7 sections. And I think spiritually, actually, and with energetic frequencies, there's stuff that we don't know that's going on. And that 7th year is a really, really powerful year. And do you want to boost the plants that you're growing? And it's not so much sacrificing, but it's more of a symbiotic relationship. So I think I've managed to wrap it up. Does anybody else want to add anything to this fantastic session of getting a little bit deeper and in depth with that whole increasing your biodiversity?
Yeah, learning, you learn by doing. So going out and taking, a small paddock, doing a little trial, playing around with it, make your mistakes, do your learning from it, and then you move forward and, get mentors, do your some paddock walks. Just get out there and do something will be the first biggest thing.
Yeah, I like that actually. Getting somebody, your mentor, even somebody that is learning alongside you, to just so that you can have a discussion. And because it is always good to bounce ideas off each other, because you're set in your little world and they're set in their little world. And then when you cross over, that's when the thinking happens. And I know Martin is very pro robust discussions and having a chat and just getting all these ideas out there.
Yeah, that's part of it. I went to a day yesterday, and we went on a little field walk. That was good fun. I had a fantastic outcome with learning some stuff about kikuyu and what happened when impact, like high impact. There was a feeder set up there, and man, that had changed things. Like that was a big event that was caused there with the impact on the cattle on the kikuyu, and it had changed things up fantastically. That another thing too is getting in, working in groups, like semi-formal groups, and sharing what you've learned. Then like if you have it set up and have a day where you sort of tell each other what you're going to do and that sort of thing, and then go and do it, and then report back, and everybody brings a report. That just rapidly speeds up the learning process when you're sharing your successes and your failures. But and then if you're doing that alongside a guy like Kevin or myself, who's around this sort of stuff, and then the next thing that I want to see happen, and we've started on it, Tamzin and I talking about it, but this the facilitation, like getting working groups together. And one of the first things I want to do is dig down on principles. Like, these successful guys like Gabe Brown and whatever, they've all got their list, even Bruce Maynard, they've all got their list of principles, right? And we've all read their list of principles, but have we personally put together our list of principles? So, and then when we've got that list of principles and understand them, we need them pinned on the bloody fridge, on the back of the toilet door, and on the bloody mirror in the bathroom. So we got 3 opportunities or multiple opportunities every day to look and focus on our principles. Because what we've got to do is we've got to own our principles. Gabe Brown absolutely owns his principles, you know, and that's what makes him the success that he is. So that's to look forward to.
And understand your techniques that you are going to use and apply. And your techniques will change over time as well, as your soil's developing, as you are developing as somebody who gets it.
Yeah.
Russell, anything to add? Thank you so much for joining us this weekend.
No, all good. I think you've done a great job at covering most things, but yeah, definitely just step out of your comfort zone and have a crack at some of this stuff, and be prepared to just spend time and watch and observe. You know, for me, like that multi-species, the first one I grew, there was no monetary gain in that for me whatsoever. But I reflect on that crop as as a farmer, you look at you remember the crops that yielded the most, etc. The crop that is the most special to me is that one because of what I learned about the whole system. It's not about the money. Cool. When you get to see Mother Nature in full flight and she's delivering everything that you hear about and whatever else, but she's doing it on your farm, in your paddock, and you get to walk out there every day and go, well, I got no worms. I can't find any worms in my monoculture crops, but I can walk in there and I can find worms, and I've got insects that are just humming. Like the whole paddock was alive the whole time. I think when you get to the point where you can see that happening, it just reassures you, obviously, that all the things you hear about and learn about when you go to these conferences, etc., they are true. You just have to provide the environment for those things to happen in. And so for me, that was the biggest buzz. And for anyone that's looking at, do I do it or don't I? Are we all just a mob of weirdos because we're growing all these things together or whatever else? Just go and get some seed and put it in the ground and spend time and have a look. That's what I would say. Yeah.
Fantastic advice, Russell.
Yeah, beautiful. I got a bit emotional then.
Actually, it's funny, I was at a thing in Inverell a couple of weeks ago, and when I was actually sort of talking about that stuff, I actually did get a bit emotional. It's like, oh man, what's going on here? You're talking about a crop, but I mean, that's the reality of it. It certainly changed my view on farming as to what we had been doing, so
yeah, wild stuff.
And that's the beauty. So it's not just having a look at the multi-species, you're actually multi-species farming. And that's so important that we are a part of all this system. And they don't lock up our land and tell, nature will do it all by itself. She won't. She will try, but we are such important factors going forwards with this whole multi-species farming. Now, before we do leave,
hang on. When we talk about regenerative farming, and multi-species farming is part of the regenerative, but to hear Russell saying that, and for him to be regenerated, that is just off the chart cool. That is the best. That's the best outcome that happened out of that paddock. Like just wild. Well done, Russell.
Thank you, Martin.
And I would normally leave it on that, but at the moment in Queensland, we need to give a shout out to our farmers in outback Queensland because they are underwater at the moment, and it in places is higher than the 1974 flood, which was pretty astronomical. There are stories coming in that houses that have been built on high land are actually up to their roof with water, with flooding. The good news is Australia is built for this, and it will move down through the states into New South Wales and possibly South Australia, or maybe even Ayr, depending on how far inland that water is. But yes, a big shout out to our outback farmers because flooding is just horrendous. And our thoughts are with you. So chin up, get your floaties on. And then with the whole multi-species, it's so linked because so much of that can actually be infiltrated into the soil. That's where we're at the moment, this tipping point of let's get this moisture in the ground because that's where it's most useful. Okay, thank you so much, all of you wonderful farmers. I love this Sunday session with you, beautiful brains, and thank you so much for joining us. And thank you to everybody who will watch this in the membership channel. Thank you so much. Okay, we're out of here.
Thanks, guys. See ya.